Good morning, friends. My name is Ben Johnson, lead pastor of St Mary's in Merbau North. This week we are exploring Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 to 5. We're coming towards the end of our series through Galatians. Next up, we'll be exploring together the book of Jonah, which is really exciting. But this is the second last week working our way through Paul's letter to the church in Galatia. Now, if you've already read that passage, it is fantastic. If not, press pause as usual and take some time to read through it. But as I was reading through that passage, particularly with the mention of loads and burdens and such, the thing that came to my mind is actually that one day school will return for our kids. At the moment, they're working inside from home during this COVID-19 pandemic as school has been closed again in Melbourne. But one day school will return, and on that day, our kids will carry their backpacks to school. That's been a long-standing rule within our household right from when they started as preppies. We live about maybe 800 metres, a kilometre away from their local school. They walk or ride or scoot to school each day, and right from day one, the rule is you always carry your own backpack, rain, hail or shine. We've got 3 kids at school right now, and we saw from the beginning that we just couldn't cope if we started carrying their backpacks for them. And they each have their backpack. They're the same backpacks, the school branded backpack. However, each of them load their backpacks a little bit different. Isaiah, who's in prep this year, his is probably the lightest. It's just got the bare essentials, some lunch in his lunchbox, a drink bottle, maybe a wet weather jacket if it rains, but it's pretty light. Aurora, who's in grade 2, has a little bit heavier, I guess. She carries a few more things, and Elijah, who's in grade 4, I reckon he loads his backpack with bricks because it is the heaviest of them all. He loads up his books, both his school books as well as books that he's reading at home, and maybe even books that he might want to read, and it weighs about 25 kilograms. But they each have a backpack, and each of them have to carry their own backpack to and from school. Now, I mention that because as we read around loads and burdens, that's what comes to my mind. Because basically what Paul is saying to the church in Galatia is each of us have our own load that we have to carry. That's just intrinsically what we have been given. Some of that might be positives, some of that might be negative, some of that might be made up of our own gifts and talents that we have been equipped with. Some of that may be even made up of our own challenges that we have to deal with. But that is our load. That is what has been given to us to carry. That is always within our backpack, and nobody else can really pick that up and carry that for us. And Paul makes that clear that each of us have our own load. Maybe some of those loads will be of varying weights and sizes, but that we can carry that. That is what has been entrusted to us as disciples and as human beings, really, to carry. And we were made to carry that. Just as we were created for work and for the purposes of work, and work was meant to be something beautiful and enjoyable and fulfilling. We know that's not always the case, but we live in a fallen world. Just as that is the case, we were made to carry our load, and we have got to carry our load ourselves. But when Paul speaks of burdens, he's differentiating from that backpack here. He's not speaking about the load that we were made to carry, or rather that we have to carry and figure out how we carry, but rather those extra weights that are burdening us down, that we were never intended to carry within our life. That actually sometimes it's not right for us to carry alone, or maybe even for somebody else to carry alone, but rather as the community of disciples or followers of Jesus, we've got to figure out how do we carry these burdens together. I actually recall, as I was reading this, the story of Cain and Abel, and after we know Cain murders Abel, God comes looking for him. And God knows exactly where Cain is, and he knows exactly where Abel is, lying dead in a ditch. But God comes before Cain, and he says to him, "Where is your brother? Where is your brother?" And Cain says to God, What do you think I am? Do you think I am my brother's keeper? Surely not. But here's the thing. We actually find, yes, Cain, you were your brother's keeper. Yes, you were somewhat responsible for your brother. Each of us are somewhat responsible for our brothers and sisters, for we share a load to carry across the community of Christ. We all have our own backpack to carry. We all have our own load to carry. But sometimes we know that because of the brokenness of this world, it's not always because of an individual person's sin. Sometimes it is. And the decisions that we make burden ourselves, and we basically place extra bricks within our backpack. But sometimes it's simply because of the brokenness of this world. Whether there is somebody else's decision that has placed a burden upon us or created a burden within us, or whether it is simply the reality that we live in a broken world, that bad things do happen, and that sin pervades everything. And we all know that there are people who are carrying burdens in their lives who they were never created to carry. And that we need to see them for what they are. That we need to understand them as burdens that ought to be shared, and that we ought to join together to figure out how do we carry this extra load, this extra burden. And we know it's difficult. It's difficult to step into that mess. It's difficult to step into that brokenness to create restoration and healing. We know that. If you've known somebody who's got brokenness within their own life, maybe even yourself, you know that it's messy. It is difficult. And there's two temptations that I want to encourage us just to be aware of and not fall into. One of those is to be stepping into other people's brokenness in order to make ourselves look good. We all know people like that, who surround themselves with people who are worse off than them, not to bring restoration and healing and wholeness, but simply to elevate their own position. They like to have the brokenness around them because it makes them feel more whole and them look better. And it's actually not about the other person. It's not about healing. It's not about restoration. It's simply about glorifying oneself. That is a temptation. It's a very real temptation that we have got to be aware of. It is not about ourselves. And it's not about making ourselves look good. Equally, we all know that there is another temptation. Another temptation when stepping into the brokenness of somebody's life. Seeking to bring restoration, seeking to bring healing and wholeness, and yet being dragged down ourselves. And yet being dragged down and having that very same brokenness pervade our own life. This is the story of the individual who tries to help an alcoholic only to become an alcoholic themselves. The individual who seeks to step into someone's mental health issues and help bring wholeness and restoration, only to be dragged down and find themselves wallowing in a pit of despair. No. Paul says to us, this does not come through our own strength. No. He's very clear. You who live by the Spirit, he says, should restore that person gently. We've got to be careful here. We've got to be careful to ensure that actually we are living led by the Spirit and empowered by the Spirit of Christ. You see, when we do that, not only do we have the power to bring restoration and healing and wholeness, because it's not certainly through our power, we have nothing to bring to that, but Jesus does. But also, as we step into that place, led by the Spirit, we step in with a gentleness, a humility, an understanding that we don't have all the answers, but Jesus does. An understanding that actually we're working with human beings here. That we're not to make ourselves look great in the middle of the process, but actually we're there to partner with Jesus, to partner with God in the restoration that He's bringing to this world, one life after another. Blessings, my friends, and have a wonderful week. Thanks.